Okay, so we're going to now talk about analyzing your audience. And this is something that can greatly improve your connection with your audience. And if you can improve the connection with them, then you can improve the influence. That is, they will probably get more out of your speech if they connect with you as a speaker, and they're going to connect when you make an attempt to work to connect them with you. So you probably read, if you read the notes or somewhere else, this story I share with the good old Charlie Brown. You all remember Charlie Brown and Peanuts and Lucy and Schroeder and Pigpen and Linus and Snoopy and Woodstock and everybody else. Well, anyway, one day Charlie Brown had gotten a bow and arrow set as a birthday or for Christmas or something. He's out practicing shooting his bow and arrow by shooting arrows into a fence. After he hits the fence, he goes up and draws a target, a bullseye, around the arrow, and he repeats this, and along comes good old positive thinking, supportive Lucy, and says something like, Charlie Brown, you blockhead, that's not how you do target practice. Why do you do it like that? And Charlie Brown says, well, this way I never miss. So while that certainly doesn't make his bow and arrow shooting any better, he is accurate in what he implies, that it is good to hit the target. And we always want to do that literally when we are, gun practice or bow and arrow practice or whatever it might be. Hang on a second, I gotta check my pump here. And so he's correct in that sense. Metaphorically, it's correct that we always want to hit the target. What we are aiming for, that's what we want to hit. Well, when it comes to a public speech address, the question kind of is, what is the target? Is the target simply to provide a good presentation? Well, the answer to that is no, that is not really the target. The goal or target is to communicate to the audience that is gathered there. You can make a great presentation but completely miss impacting or influence your audience. Or they may love you as a presenter but have no idea what you were talking about. So we want to do both. We want to, can I create my speech, develop my speech, practice my speech in such a way that it can have a greater impact on my target audience. And so that's what we're talking about today. And what different things the textbook is going to tell us. There are some, not tricks, but strategies we can use to increase the odds that we are going to hit the target. Now, I just share this one story about early morning classes versus late morning classes. Now me, I'm an early morning person. When I wake up, I am wide awake. I don't need time to wake up. I don't need time to warm up to the idea of getting out of bed. I wake up and I'm good to go from the get-go. But I also kind of fall asleep early. Quite often what I will do is fall asleep early, then wake up early and just stay up. But anyway. So when I come into a class, I quite often at another school, I would teach a class at 7:30. Great for me, but that group of people were dead. There might be one or two who had some energy, and I'm teaching, I'm instructing, I'm using humor, I'm getting nothing. No responses, nothing. But then when I teach a class at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, which is fine with me, but the students there, they are energetic, they are excited, they are motivated, and quite often we have to get a good feel for what our audience is like so that we can then shape our speech to meet them. Because an audience may vary completely just even on things like the time of day. So they're going to give us two general strategies to try. One is called demographics. That is, are there things we can measure with our audience that once we know those things, we can shape our speech to hit the target? And there are a list of them that we're going to get to in a few moments. But the other element of this, I kind of skipped over this a moment ago, is to talk about people in general. and then we'll talk about our audience. So we're backing up a little bit and then moving forward. The textbook uses a phrase that we should all try to be audience-centered. That is, whoever it is out in front of me, whether it is the sleepy, no energy 7:30 a.m. class or the highly energetic and involved and motivated 3 o'clock class, whoever it might be out there in the audience, we have to be focused on them. So the analogy is, if I approach my 3 o'clock class like I did my 7:30 class or vice versa, I might miss the target. So I've got to shape myself to be more audience-centered. Now, there's another phrase we can use to talk about being audience-centered, and the reason is because people are self-centered. They are thinking about themselves. What's in it for me? In fact, there's an analogy that one of my favorite communicators, John Maxwell, who has a leadership development and training service, or at least used to. And one of the analogies he said for public speaking, he would say, everybody listens to radio station WIIFM. Meaning we're all tuned into that and it's like, well, what is WIIFM? Well, in the East, out here radio stations begin with the letter K. In the east of the Mississippi, they begin with W. And so WIIFM, meaning what's in it for me, right? And we all do. We all want to get something out of anything. We don't just want it to be for the benefit of the good. We want something out of it because we are egotistical, self-centered, selfish, and if you don't believe it, just look around. We're all that way. You're that way, I'm that way. We're all fighting that tendency to make everything about me. But once we realize that people are listening to radio station WIIFM, what am I going to get out of this? What's in it for me? Then we can accept that fact and say, okay, so I need to make my speeches not all about them, but I need to deliver it in a way that they're going to get something out of it. And probably if we try to make them work too hard, they probably won't try that hard. So what can I do to make my speeches more focused on my audience so they can get more out of it? And so now I go back to what I was going to say before. One of the tools we can use are what are called demographics, or demographic audience analysis. Are there measurements I can take of this group before me? And the general measurements are age, gender, sexual orientation, religion, racial, ethnic, and cultural background, and group membership. In other words, whatever group, however you want to define that, we are part of, we have some tendencies to be similar in many ways. Now, I want to say that very carefully and with a big caveat, and that is, that doesn't mean that we should just treat everybody the same. If you're part of a category, we just treat you the same way. We're still unique within our category, but there are just some general tendencies or measurements that we just need to be aware of when we are looking at a group. For example, while many females are into sports, I would probably estimate to say that probably more males like football than females. I haven't done a measurement. I can't prove that, but I think that's probably true. So if I was speaking to an audience of all men, I might use more football analogies than if I was speaking to a group of all women. You just have to, and we want to be careful, like I said, we don't want to create any stereotypes. We don't want to paint everybody into the same corner. We don't want to necessarily make generalities that may not be true, but there are some things you might be able to do. There are lots of women football fans. My wife is an avid Kansas City Chiefs football fan, but probably in general, males are more football fans. But anyway, you get the idea. So what can I do? Now, the trouble with demographics in a class or in a one-time setting versus a class, in a class you get to know who's in that classroom. Age, gender, all those things. But in a one-time setting, when you go to speak somewhere, you have no way of knowing who's going to be there. Socioeconomic status, are they all from Chino? Did they fly in from New York? You know, what do I know who's going to be sitting before me? And can I measure that? And can I then take that measurement and adapt it into my speaking? Probably more helpful is what we call situational audience analysis. And that is where there's particular things that happen in a specific speaking situation that I need to adapt to and change to and adjust to in that situation. So sometimes, so for you as a speaker, if you can, excuse me, adapt easily and adjust easily and see something and change your approach based on a certain situation that is happening right in front of you, versus being flustered and saying, oh, I can't do this, I don't know what I'm going to do, and just kind of give up. If you are more flexible and adaptable, you're going to be a better public communicator. I cannot count the number of things that have happened while I have been speaking in places and at times that there's no way I could have planned for. And I consider myself a fairly flexible and adaptable person. I like to, I have a plan and a strategy, and I want my plan and strategy to go through. Sometimes it's just not going to happen. I have been speaking at my church when there'd been a car accident outside, or a medical emergency happens and you have to adapt to that situation. The power's gone out, and different things, and how are you going to adapt to those? And that is what is called situational audience analysis. Can I look at my group, my audience, and adjust as needed based on what's going on? They give us several examples. For example, group size. I knew, and in classes and at the church, I knew the kind of what size group to expect each class or every Sunday. I kind of knew that. But can you walk into a situation, and this would be true at funerals. Sometimes you'll have 10 people. Sometimes you'll have 200 people. I've done a funeral for one nephew, adult nephew, and his daughter, for his aunt. He was the only one there. In fact, I did a funeral one time when nobody was there. The gentleman had paid for the funeral, and I was to be the officiant, and it was just me and the deceased. So you have to adjust to those kinds of situations. A physical setting. Sometimes you'll walk into a place and it will be the perfect setting for giving a speech. The lighting is good, the seating is good, the temperature is right, the lectern is perfect, you have a nice place to sit before you come up, everything's just all set. Other times you'll walk into a place and maybe you've never been there before, you don't know where to put your notes, you don't know where you're supposed to sit, nobody's telling you, the lighting is horrible there at the lectern, it's rainy outside, it's too dark in the room, and you have to adjust to the setting, maybe just at a few moments' notice. While we're on that, I would suggest when you're going to speak somewhere, show up early. Get there half an hour before the event begins. I know it takes time, but then you can go in, see where you're going to sit, where are you going to put your notes, where are you in the order of the event happening? Is somebody going to introduce you? Where's the microphone? Is it going to be a lapel or a mic on a mic stand? Is there a sound person? No sound person? If you can get all those things clear in your mind of the physical setting, it's going to be great. One place I was speaking, I knew it ahead of time, but there was one place in the floor that squeaked. And I knew if I stood on that spot, it would be, And so knowing that ahead of time, knowing this physical setting, I was able to avoid standing in that spot or walking in that spot and to avoid the noise. Another unique situation is what is called disposition toward the topic. If you have a topic you're going to be speaking on a holiday or at a wedding or a funeral, you kind of can figure out what the disposition toward that event or that topic is going to be. If it's a funeral, there's going to be a kind of a sorrow. If it's a wedding, it's going to be more celebratory. If it is a certain holidays, it's going to be more patriotic. But what is the disposition toward the topic? Also, what is the disposition toward the speaker, toward you? Do you have a reputation that precedes you? Have they never heard of you before? Do they see you as the young kid or the old guy who should have retired 10 years ago? How do they see you? Certain people, doesn't matter what they say or do at that event, their reputation is already set, and either the audience hates them or loves them, and it really doesn't matter what they say. They're going to be just as much hated or loved either way. Take that for what it is. And then finally is disposition toward the occasion. Like I said before, a Memorial Day speech it's got to be patriotic, right? That's the way it's got to be. That's what everybody's expecting. Has nothing to do with you. Has nothing to do with what you say. It's the whole element before you arrived and after you leave. It will still be Memorial Day. So that's something to consider. Now, sometimes you are able to even conduct a poll with your audience to know where they are that can help you prepare. In my face-to-face courses, when it comes time for the second big speech, the persuasive speech, the speakers are given the opportunity to do a quick poll of the class. Like if they're going to do a speech on spaying and neutering your animals, and they could be for that or against that. But they could send around a survey to say, do you have any animals? Are they all spayed and neutered? But gather a little bit of information so that when they come to give their speech, they can say, now, according to my class survey, I know that 85% of you are in favor of spaying and neutering, but only 15% of you have done so with your own animals. So now he knows, the speaker knows they have an audience to speak to, but if their speech was on why you should spay and neuter your animals and 95% have already done so, you probably at that point, if you know it ahead of time, may want to change your topic because you're, as they say, you're preaching to the choir. You're not going to convince, there's only a few people and the majority are already on your side, and so you're really not persuading that many people. So a poll can be an interesting situation, but very seldom are you able to do that outside of a closed situation like a classroom. But they do in the textbook talk about one method, and that is at the beginning you can ask and do a survey, an impromptu survey, and just ask the audience, how many of you have your dogs neutered or spayed? And then you can know, so at least you know where you stand, but maybe too late to change anything, but at least you know where you stand with that audience. So that's another method you can use. Okay, so the whole idea is once you know some information, can you adjust to that bit of information you have, even though the speech is coming up? Now, it's easier to adjust when you know ahead of time where your audience is, and you can write your speech, choose your language, your vocabulary, your style, your jokes, your illustrations. Did I say how you dress, where you stand? All you can decide ahead of time based on knowledge. But sometimes you don't have that freedom to figure that out ahead of time. So you get in there and you kind of try to, while you're giving your speech, you're still watching for cues of things you might adjust. And you can even adjust during a speech. You can adjust certain things based on what feedback you're getting. I remember I was giving one speech and I was using a couple of animal illustrations, and as I look back on it now, they were a little bit more on the not mean, but not cruel, but the animals did not turn out well for either of the animals. So I told the first one, I got such a strong response, I dumped the second illustration because I knew it would just add fuel to the fire, so I just let it go. So adjust beforehand based on what you can know or what you learn before you speak, but then also look for feedback from your audience while you're speaking so that maybe you can pick something up and adjust accordingly. Sometimes all you can do is leave something out that you know is coming that isn't, you're pretty sure it's not going to go over well. And that's a lot easier. You just have to take out that component and just leave it behind and move on toward the end of your speech. Okay, so there's some comments, observations, and some suggestions of how knowing your audience better through audience analysis can help you improve your presentations. All right, thank you.